Today is May the 6th, 2015. My name is Tanya Finchum, along with Alex Bishop, and we're with Oklahoma State University. Today we're in Quapaw, Oklahoma, to speak with Martha McFarland. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you for having us today. This is part of our Oklahoma 100-year life, so we'll start with having you tell us when and where you were born.
I was born March the 20th, 1915, in Ottawa County, in the Shawnee Lake District, on Highway 10, east of Miami. I have lived in Ottawa County all my life, and I'm still a resident of Ottawa County.
Well, were your parents from here?
No, my father was from around Dunaway, Missouri, and my mother from Joplin, Missouri.
And what brought them here?
What?
What brought them here?
My father bought a farm on East Highway 10, and he and my mother moved here after they were married in December the 25th, 1911. They were married on Christmas Day.
How did they meet?
My mother had graduated from high school and was teaching in a rural country school out of what they called Atlas, Missouri, which was east of Dunaway. And you could teach school right out of high school then. And my father was a miner or a farmer there in that district, and that's how they met. She had a brother that lived there, and I suspect that's how they met, through the brother, or maybe through some of the school people. Sure. The school teachers boarded with the families so many weeks or so long during their teaching year, and she may have met him during that period.
Well, did she have to quit when she got married?
No, but they moved from east of Dunaway to, well, she never lived there. He had to have a place ready for her to move into down here on Highway 10. He had already bought it, or bargained to buy it.
What did he farm?
What did he farm?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he raised corn and wheat and oats, and cattle was not an issue then. People in the country didn't raise beef cattle like they do now. Mm-hmm. So any of the, in the cattle line would have been a milking breed, and they sold the milk from that. Mm-hmm. But beef was not a problem then. They didn't raise beef. We didn't have beef on our farm ever in the time we lived there.
What kind of meat would you eat? Chicken?
We ate chicken, and we had lamb, and we had squirrel and rabbit, and ducks and geese.
You didn't have possum?
No, I've eaten possum. It's not bad when you cook it with sweet potatoes in the oven.
Huh. Well, did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one brother that was when he was 94 years old when he died, and he had been a school superintendent, and he resigned from it and went to California. He did not like the issue of being on the fence, one pulling this way and one pulling that way. He said there had to be a better way of making a living and being happier with it. He had a master's degree in science, and then I had a sister that was 2 years younger than he, and she lived to be 84, I believe. Then I had a younger sister, and she died when she was 23. She died real young. She had what at that time they called acute encephalitis. And now it appears it's kind of a paralyzing disease. Her lungs were paralyzed, and she died in Walter Reed Hospital. Her husband was a Marine. And Then we had our dogs and cats, and I had every crippled chicken or bird that ever came by. I had just about every kind of the house plants you could find at that time, and now my room is loaded with flowers.
Would you have to help around the farm?
Help.
Help.
I pulled many a row of grain, and I have a scar where it was hit with a hoe by one of the other kids who got over anxious. But no, you walked and you pulled the weeds or you chopped them with a hoe.
Barefooted or with shoes?
Well, barefooted most of the time. Usually you had about 2 pairs of shoes during the year. One was to wear to school and all, and one was for church and there. When your school shoes were worn, then you took your others, and then you got 2 new pair for the same routine.
Well, did your mother make your clothes?
My mother was not a very good seamstress, but you didn't have too many clothes. I remember when my brother was in high school, and that was getting on up in the century, he had 1 pair of overalls to wear to school. He was in high school. But they washed them in the middle of the week, and my sister got up and ironed them for him to go to. So, times were hard then. And I had 1 dress when I was in the 7th grade, and no coat. And we washed the dress during the middle of the week, and then you ironed it too. Well, like now, you just take it out of the tub and dry and put it on. But I didn't have a coat, but when I was in the 8th grade, my teacher, Mrs. Phillips, gave me a sweater. And then when I was in the 9th grade in school, my uncle's aunt had an extra coat, so I had another coat. But times were hard then.
That would have been in the 30s?
Been in 29, 30s.
During the Depression time?
That's right.
Do you have any other memories from that time period?
Do I have other memories?
From the Depression?
Oh yes, I remember that we had 2 milk cows. One was always big milk, while the other one was, waiting for the birth of a calf or something. But we sold milk to a customer, and he didn't have the money to pay, and he was a preacher. Had several children, and my father gave him milk, part of that milk, for a long, long time to help with his children. That was my father. That's his method.
What was his name?
Thad.
Thad.
Thad, Sobieska. That's, I think, a Russian name.
Can you spell it that?
Sobieski, I think is the way you spell it. But it's a Russian name, and the family had a friend that they doted on, so they named him after their friend. But he was called Thad.
Well, what was his last name?
Snyder, S-N-Y-D-E-R.
So-
And that is German or Dutch.
Okay. Well, what were Christmases like when you were a little girl?
Well, we always got something. It wasn't always something, it was something we needed always so we could use. But I remember for birthdays that my mother would save the piece of glassware that was in the oatmeal thing, like a cup or a cereal bowl or something, and she'd put it up, and that would be our birthday present. Because all families used the oatmeal, and I still like it. It's a good cereal.
Well, how would she do her laundry?
Well, you had a great big old tub that had a number on how big they were, and you had a washing board like this with some ripples in it. And you had a big copper oval-shaped thing you put on the fire outside. You washed your white clothes on that board and you threw them in that vat or whatever I can't call the name of it yourself, but you boiled them and then you took them back out and you washed them again. And by the way, when I was 11 years old, that was my duty, was to help do the washing. And I helped on that board from the time I was 11 years old on that.
So you scrubbed it?
You scrubbed them like this,
And then
you turned them over and you scrubbed them on the other side. Now, don't misunderstand me, you didn't have too many clothes. I'm kidding, you had enough clothes to wear.
Sure.
But you didn't.
Well, would you do them outside in the winter too?
No, you did them in the house, but you went outside and took the clothes. You boiled them on the stove, a big old wood stove, when it was cold.
Well, can you describe the house that you grew up in?
Well, the house I grew up in was T-shaped. It had 2 long rooms on the top side, and then the leg on the T, it had 2 long rooms there. And the first one was the kitchen and the dining room, and then the other was usually a sitting room with 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3, a bed or so in there for little kids. And then the other room was big, long 2 rooms, and that was your bedrooms.
Okay. Had to share with your sister
And your brothers.
and your, oh, all of them, okay.
Your brother, I had the one brother.
And did your mother quilt?
My mother did not quilt any until, that I knew about, until she was in her 70s. And she learned how to embroidery at the same time. But now she was a quilting fiend, piecing quilts, and I was too. I pieced quilts, seems like all my life. And I had just several. I gave away lots of them, and I also gave some for, you know, when you'd rifle them off or something in an organization. But I love to piece quilts, and I'd piece them now here if I could see and if my fingers would work, because I love piecing quilts.
Well, if she didn't quilt, what would you use for cover?
Well, you usually took 2 pieces of flannel or something and put this cotton between it, and you took yarn and a darn needle and stuck it through it and tied it, and it was a knot that you held it together.
Okay. What they call tacking?
I guess you would call it that.
Well, where did you go to elementary school?
I went through the 4th grade at District Number 5 on Highway 10, about 12 miles east of Miami. And
How many kids were in?
I don't remember that part of it. Part of them were big as adults, big as the teacher. And
Was it a one room?
yes, ma'am, it was 1 room, an outdoor bathroom facilities, wood stove in the wintertime. No lunches. You carried your lunch we did in a little 1/2 gallon tin soap bucket with a lid on it. We carried it to school, and we lived 1.25 miles from the school where we went. And if the weather was really bad, my dad put us on 2 horses, and we went to school, and he took the bridles off, and the horses came home, and then my dad would come back after us. And incidentally, my sister that's older than I, she never missed a day or was never tardy in her entire school life. That's on her record here someplace in Quapaw. They graduated from Quapaw, and I did too, and I graduated in 1933.
Okay. Well, what was in your little bucket for lunch?
You had Well, they made their own light bread, their own white bread and all. You had a sandwich with maybe a big slice of ham on it. You'd cured yourself. And you always had fruit. And we had an orchard. And you always had fruit in it. And that was about all you needed, sandwiches and fruit.
Would your mother can much?
Yes, but it was a different kind of canning than this canning nowadays. And we didn't have tin cans then, so you used glass jars. And there was brand of Masons. You just wouldn't can if you didn't have Mason fruit jars, because they were supposed to be about the best.
And where would she get her jars?
Well, you could buy them at the stores where they had everything, you know, like for sale.
Well, what was Quapaw like when you were younger?
When I came to Quapaw in 1925, and I'll tell you that we had two railroads, one on the east side, one on the west side. We had two lumber yards, one on the east and one on the west. We had a movie theater. We had a casket factory. We had a bottling works. We had a doctor that had his own residence here in Quapaw. And he did his doctoring out of his office, and he lived right on a block off of Main Street. And we had, Dr. McCallum was his name. And you could get him anytime you wanted him. He was a good old country doctor. We had a dry goods store here that you could buy material and clothes. And we had a hotel. We had two banks. That's all I can remember right now.
That's bigger than I thought.
It was a thriving little town. And there is a story that goes around about it that Quapaw could have had this streetcar track when it came through here, but the city dads were afraid that the money would be spent out of town, so they wouldn't let the streetcar come through Quapaw. So we bypassed us and went through Century, that's west of Quapaw, or was west of Quapaw. It's just brush now, I think. I don't think there's any houses in Century, but it was west. And the west of the high school, all 3 or 4 miles.
Well, when you were in high school, did you play any sports?
I played basketball, and I played, not volleyball, but softball. I played basketball the 7th and 8th grade, and then I played in high school.
Were the courts inside or outside?
Well, the courts were inside. We had a gym here in Quapaw, but I was never good at track or anything like that, but I did play basketball.
What kind of outfit would you play in?
Oh, you had a gym suit, but it had legs about halfway to your knees, and it was pretty well covered up in the chest area and all.
And what position did you play?
Guard.
Guard.
I got in trouble one time because I didn't think the referee was doing our players just exactly right, and I told him off about it. Then I had to go and apologize to him when we went to school on Monday. But that is the way it is the way it is, and I didn't think he was fair, and a lot of others, but they didn't have the guts, we call it, to go and tell him.
But you did.
I did.
Did your parents make you apologize, or did the teacher?
Well,
Coach, I guess.
The superintendent asked me to. He asked me to. He didn't make me. He asked me to, and I did. But I used to be the one that did the fighting for my 2 sisters. and all. But that came from my father, because when my brother was walking that 1.25 miles to school, the big kids made him walk in the timber, and I wouldn't let him walk on the road, and they stole his lunch. And so my dad just, when he found out what was going on, he just got on his riding horse and down to their house he went. He told that man, he said, I'm coming down to see you this time and tell you how your boys are acting, but I want you to know the next time I'll come, I'll whip the stuffing out of you. My dad was quite a fighter for the underdog. He was not a professional, but he was darn good with his hands. And his principles were, you had to be good to reach them. My dad never swore, never smoked, but he drank a beer once in a while when he worked in the mines. But that's
the way it was, I guess.
That's the way it was with him.
Yeah. Who would discipline the children?
Both of them.
Both.
They never fussed over. They agreed before they punished.
And how would they punish, typically?
You got a paddling.
With a belt or a hickory or what?
Oh, a switch.
A switch. Okay.
A switch.
And were you ornery enough to see that happen a little bit?
I've always been ornery. I've always been active and not. I wasn't one of these that sits on the back row.
Well, in high school, what was your favorite subject?
Well, I don't know, but I graduated third in my class. I made the honor roll, and one of my grandsons found my book with the names in it, and he asked me if he could have it with my name in it, and I said yes, but you just were about due for paddling if you didn't make a good grade. I never failed any subject. I didn't have my brother never, my sisters never. Our school came first.
Wow.
And the education was it. And my brother, as I said, had a master's in science. My sister worked in Washington, D.C. as a secretary in the IRS. She took the examination and passed it and went up there. She was the secretary in Joplin before she went to Washington.
Well, where did your brother get his master's?
Pittsburgh.
That's pretty close to here.
But you know, teachers didn't get very much money, and they taught all these months, and then they borrowed money to go to school to further their education. And I think my brother started for about $65 a month. You know, back there in 29 and 30s was what they didn't get any money.
Did any of them have to serve in the military, in the war?
As any of my folks? No, my brother didn't. He was a school teacher, and he also worked in this general power here that was making during the Army work. And then my husband, he worked there too. He was a foreman at the night shift. And none of my immediate went.
Okay.
Now my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, was one of the, he was the nearest to a doctor they had when the United States transferred the 25 destroyers to Canada back in that age. He was a pharmacist, and he was the nearest doctor they had on board those ships when they moved. That's all they sent. And then he was at Pearl Harbor when they bombed it, and his ship had to go into Bremerton, Washington for about 6 months to be repaired. My sister transferred from Washington to Bremerton, Washington to the big out there while he was there, but he then didn't have to move out of coast. He went different places, so she just stayed in Washington and Oregon, where they lived when they both died.
Pretty place out there.
It is.
It's pretty.
I like those things, but I like to visit in California, but I don't want to live out there.
Quapaw's home, huh?
Well, yes, and they have pretty flowers, but you have them here if you cultivate them.
That's true. Well, how did you meet your husband?
He had dated a cousin of mine. It was a step cousin of mine up there. He lived in Dunaway, he and his family did. And this cousin, step cousin of mine, my uncle and them all went to the same church in Dunaway. And then I met him through him.
And what would you do for dates?
Well, you went to the movie. You could go for about 10 cents or something. And if you waited till weekends and went, you get to see a serial Western, where it cut off the week before. You also got sometimes a dish or something like that as a little prize.
And how did he pop the question?
Well, I guess we better get the dirty work done this week. Well, we talked about it. He was a kidder too. And better get the dirty work done. And we were married in January, I guess it was. January 1935. And our oldest child was born in April of 1936. And then we had twins 2 years later.
Handful.
What?
Were they a handful?
Well, my mother entered into the pictures and took care of them during the daytime. She needed the income I would pay her because my dad had minor silicosis by then. So she needed the income. And we lived there a long, long time before we bought a house here in Quapaw. We bought a house at the south edge here of Quapaw. We built that round top building. That was a grain company, a feed and grain that we ran. And then we moved to a farm down south of Narcissus. And we bought one down there and moved down there.
And you were working too?
I worked for 66 years, and I worked all the time.
Doing what? What type of work?
Well, that's where I got part of this arthritis. I've been the janitor, but I always was the boss's secretary, and I was the bookkeeper, and I had to hire and fire anybody. That's what you call Girl Friday, I guess. And I worked I never had but two bosses really. The last one I worked for, it was in Miami, and that was Ed Walker. And he had realty property, he had pharmacies, and he had nursing homes. And he put the pharmacies in the Walmart stores as they came in the district, in the area. They had them up in Missouri and up in Kansas and down in Oklahoma. But when Walmart started, they didn't own the pharmacy or the shoe department or those. They rented out the space to them. And they had all these nursing homes. They had 5 nursing homes and pharmacies, and I've forgotten how many now, and then they had rental property. And they still have rental property here in town.
Well, if you worked 67, how old were you when you retired?
I retired in 2001.
Okay.
So that'd be 85, 86.
That's a long time to work.
Well, I was ready to quit before I did, but they didn't seem to find anybody. And finally I said, I'm out of here. on a certain day. If you do, all right, and if you don't, all right. Of course, I wouldn't have ever done that to them, but they found somebody.
Were you still driving at that time?
Yeah, I still drove.
Did you?
I didn't quit driving, I think, till I was 94. And I was afraid of what the other fellow was going to do, and I was afraid of what Martha was going to do. So I said, it's time to quit.
Decided on your own.
Yes, my son wanted to take the car away from me several years before that. I gave it up because he didn't think I was capable, and the two girls said, now listen, if you want to take Mother where she wants to go, whether she needs to go or don't need to go, you want to go pick her up or you want to do the driving, all right, we'll let you take the car away. But he didn't want that, so I drove it longer than that.
Sounds like they got some of your stubborn streak.
Every one of them. And every one of them have green eyes, hazel eyes. And if you see mine,
They're, yes, pretty green. Brownish.
and anyway, my three children are like three old hens with one little chicken, and I'm that chicken. Does that tell you how devoted they are to me?
Yes.
And I have 7 grandchildren and about 17 great-grandchildren. And I will have, before long, 11 fifth generation great-great-grandchildren. I already have 10 and we're expecting another one.
How do you keep up with all of them?
I write them down.
Write them down.
Usually when I get a new calendar, I put all
Birth dates in?
of them on there. But I don't participate in any of the birthday parties and things anymore because it was just too much. I just can't do it. Now they had a party Saturday night for one of my great-grandson's wives. She'd graduated from school at Claremore, and for her hometown there in Baxter, had a party for her graduation party. But I didn't want, this night would be bad for me anyway. I am extra careful with where I step and where I walk.
Now, you say you don't go to many of the parties that they have. What about your 100th birthday party?
Well, I went to it.
And what did they? How was your party? What was it like?
I've forgotten. We had 51 at the dinner at the restaurant, and I've forgotten how many came for cake and ice cream out to my daughters that day, but we had an awful lot. I had a niece that's a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and she came from Washington, D.C., and her sister was a surgeon, but she's retired. And she came, her home was in California, and she came, and from Texas, we had quite a few from Houston, and all around. This little article that was in the paper here the other day told how many from all the different places that came, but they bring me flowers. Well, there's not a lot of other things that they can bring me.
There isn't.
I don't need any clothes because I've emptied 3 clothes closets when I quit work. And because I didn't need all those clothes, and then when I came up here, my daughter emptied about 3 more. And she said, you don't need all those, and I don't.
Well, did you ever think you would live to 100?
Huh?
Did you think you'd make it to
I
100?
had no idea that I would ever live to be 100. But, you know, while I was growing up and everything, people didn't live to be 100.
Mm-hmm.
And I really never thought a lot about it. It just seemed to happen. But when I got on up there 90 and past 90, why, I began to wish I'd lived to be 100 to see what it would be like. The biggest thing is that I've been in this wheelchair.
That's the biggest challenge?
That's the biggest one. Now, I walked with a different kind of a walker when I came here. Somehow I got in this, but they promised me they'd help me walk behind my walker again as soon as they get through the girl they're working on. They don't do therapy here, but 2 or 3 of the nurses have kind of taken over and are helping some that need some help, so they said they'd help me. But I was walking behind a walker, a rollerator, and somehow I got in this wheelchair.
Well, how long have you been in here?
I came in March. I'm going on 2 years.
You lived at home until then?
What?
You lived at home until then?
By myself.
Wow.
Except a cat. And I had an educated cat. I'd had her, she was about 18 years old, and she knew everything I said, and she would do it. And she slept on my bed, and in the mornings when we got up, I had a dresser that I left open about that far so I could reach out and take a hold of it and get up. She'd hop over on the table and get on that little ledge, walk over to my walker, and wait for me. And then she'd ride out into the living room. She wanted to be brushed and everything first, and so that's what we did. I could ask her if she wanted outdoors. She knew where the door was to go outdoors. She'd go out with me to get the paper and then come back. If I said I had to go to the bathroom, she got down and she went to the bathroom, got on the edge of the bathtub and waited for me. If I asked her if she was hungry, she knew what I meant. Asked her if it's bedtime, well, she was ready to go to bed, and if I wasn't ready to go to bed, she was. And she knew what time to get up and what time I was supposed to get up. She knew what she wanted to eat, and that's what I gave her to eat. And I could open the side of my refrigerator, the freezer side of my side-by-side, take out frozen chicken, and she could be clear in the other part of the house. And she knew that I took out frozen chicken because she came and started crying. She was part half calico and half calico and, well, I'll tell you in a minute. But she had that old whiny cry, Siamese. She had that old whiny cry they have. And that's the way she'd cry for that frozen chicken. And I'd have to shave off her a bite or two of frozen chicken, and she was all right.
What was her name?
Huh?
What was her name?
What was her name?
Mm-hmm.
What'd you ask me
Yeah,
for?
what was the cat's name?
What'd you ask me for? I noticed wasn't no more name.
It'll come to you.
But she was, had Siamese markings.
And she was 18?
And she was 18 years old. How I came by her, she was a little bitty kitten, and one of my grandsons had it, and his mother was going to have another baby, and she couldn't be able, the cat couldn't, they couldn't have a cat around on account of the litter box. When the baby was born, why, the dad wouldn't let the cat come home, so Grandma got the cat. But that wasn't the first animal I felt heirs to that way. Grandma would keep it for us, so Grandma kept the cat or the dog for a time, and then, what did you ask me her name for? I know it as well as I know my own.
She sounded like a pretty smart cat.
She was. I say she was educated. She was a beautiful color. She had the ears and the tail of a Siamese, you know, this sort of a sable brown. And then she had a few calico markings on her.
Sounds like she had you trained.
Oh, I was her slave. She knew what she wanted. She knew when it was time to go to bed and time to get up.
Well, when you were growing up, did you have pets?
Oh heavens, I had every chicken that had a broken leg or every bird that couldn't fly or anything like that.
Your family raised chickens?
Oh, we raised chickens and we had ducks and we had geese and,
Well, when it was time to kill them, who would do that?
well, my dad was there.
Would he do it?
And my brother. Sometimes she had a hard hand.
Your mother didn't have to?
Well, she could if she needed to, and I did too. Yes. There's several ways you can kill a chicken.
What was your preferred method?
What?
What was your preferred method? How did you do it?
Oh, I just took a long steak and put it across the chicken's neck and boom.
And would you eat it?
Huh?
Would you eat it right then? Like cook it later?
We'd cook it later. Well, yeah, you don't. When that's your food, one of your basic foods, you don't
Yeah.
think about how green in the face you're going to get.
Quite a bit different than going to the freezer and getting one today, isn't it?
Oh my. They're all cut up in the freezer if you want them, and cooked if you want them.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you were a member of...
I'm a member of the Eastern Star, a member of the White Shrine, and a member of the Amaranth. I've been a member of White Shrine and Eastern Star for over 60 years, and I've been a member of Amaranth for over 30 years.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Well, it's not as well known, I don't think, as the White Shrine is. Azotus Shrine in Joplin. Mine was Gethsemane Shrine, but that's where they didn't have enough attendance, so they consolidated with Azotus. But I passed officer in all of them, served on lots and lots of committees. My most interesting committee that I ever served on, and I served for years, was what we called our material objective. I paid a penny a week, 52 cents a year, into that fund, just like every other member did. And we operated on people, and we got them glasses. And years ago, there wasn't any limit on what we could spend, but we have a limit now, what we have. But one of my most interesting cases was a little girl at Jay, Oklahoma, that needed a heart transplant. And that Dr. DeBakey in Dallas, or Houston, operated on her when she was just about 5 years old or so. And I followed her all the way through high school. And she got to where she could play sports and things. And that was most interesting to see her progress. Of course, we bought glasses and we bought teeth and we did everything else. But the most disgusting one I was ever sent on, there were 3 on the committee, it was over to Seneca, Missouri, and 2 school teachers. And when the committee walked in, we asked what progress they'd made, with the doctor or finding the girl, working on the girl. They said, well, we haven't done anything. We've been waiting to see what you'd do. Well, most parents would have moved heaven and earth to have found something before waiting on somebody else. But we couldn't take that case because it was in Missouri and we had boundaries. The shrine was in Miami then, and we had boundaries that we were in their jurisdiction if we took one that one. But and we had, like for instance, we had a little boy born at Welch that had a cleft palate and a hair lip. And we operated on him for both of those things. You couldn't operate on two of that at the same time. We had to wait so he was so old for part of it. But he had cleft palate. And it was just wonderful what they did. And I really liked that. And I can't tell you how many years I served on that. It seemed like I served forever.
Like to help others.
Uh-huh.
Well, was church an important part of growing up?
Oh, church was very important in growing up. But I didn't attend church all that often after I was grown. I went with my kids when they were little, but then I kind of got out of the habit, but I've been attending it here. But
And we told not to sing. I'm not going to ask you to sing.
huh?
I'm not going to ask you to sing a
Well,
favorite
I
church
hope you
song.
don't ask me to sing.
You were reciting a poem?
Something from Shakespeare.
Can you say that again for us?
Know ye this, to thine own self be true, and it must follow the day as the night. Thou canst not then be false to any man.
And
I like Shakespeare. Does that
when,
make me odd?
no,
I had a set of Shakespeare books that I gave away one time here a while back because I wasn't using them anymore. But I love those sayings like that.
how did you get interested in him, Shakespeare?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know.
Well, what's your favorite play or work by Shakespeare?
I couldn't even tell you that. I don't pay attention to the plays. I pay attention to the writings.
What's your favorite?
Well, that was my favorite.
And what?
That and the evening prayer are two of my favorites.
The evening prayer. What's that?
If I have wounded any soul today, dear Lord, forgive. If I have walked in my own willful way, dear Lord, forgive. You know, it's a song.
I haven't heard it. I'll have to look it up.
Well, you look it up. If people paid attention to some of the things like that they sing and say, there'd be a lot better world. Because there's meaning in every bit of it, just like the one in Shakespeare's that I told you. If you're true to yourself, you're not going to be false to anybody else.
Very true.
Huh?
Very true.
You think about it, and if you think about the evening prayer, if I have wounded any soul today, if you said something or done something that wounded somebody, then you're praying. You know you did it. And that should be a lesson to you.
And you go apologize to the referee.
Yeah. I probably needed to apologize more times than I have. But you know, sorry, to say you're sorry, is something you say, but it's the hardest thing in the world for people to say, is I'm sorry.
And really
Have
mean
you
it.
ever noticed it?
I have.
It's the hardest thing for people to say.
Well, did you ever travel in your life?
Well, I've been to Canada, straight north, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. I've been to Nova Scotia, I've been to Hawaii, I've been to Australia, and I've been to Old Mexico time after time. I've been to Buffalo, New York, I've been to Miami, Florida, and I used to go to Ponca City about every 2 weeks. My daughter and son-in-law lived down there, and 2 grandsons. We'd go down to, when they lived at Houston, we'd go over to Old Mexico every now and then. And my sister lived at El Paso, and we'd go over to Mexico from there. So
What was your favorite place you ever visited?
Quapaw. No, As I said before, California is beautiful, but I wouldn't want to live there. And I can't think of, I wouldn't want to live in a great, great big city either. But I don't know what would be my favorite. You can have all the flowers here that you have anyplace else if you have room for them.
Well, Quapaw's an Indian name, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So is Miami. Now that's Miami, it's not Miami. And Seneca's an Indian name, Wyandott's an Indian name, Peoria's an Indian name, and what else is around here?
Well, did you have much interactions with them growing up?
With Indian? I don't fault the Indians 1 single cent that they get out of the government, because, stop and think, our forefathers did the same thing that these foreign countries are doing, pushing countries back. This country belonged to the Indians. There was tribes all over the United States, and we pushed them back. Of course, we cannot pay forever for what our forefathers did, but they pushed the Indians right back from them. Just exactly like those foreigners are doing some of the countries over there. Anything the Indians can get out of the government owes them.
I thought you might have had school with some.
Oh, Quapaw used to have Indian school still. The Whitebirds, the street's named for out here, they went here. Ellen was a girl's name, and Robert Jr. was the son. And when some Indian died, they used to have a big feast the day of the funeral. Anybody that wanted to come could come to it. Peoria in the name.
Did you ever go to any of those feasts?
What?
Did you ever attend any of those feasts? When you're talking about in the funeral, did you ever attend any of the funerals?
No, we never did, because, we weren't Indian. I didn't have a drop of blood, Indian blood in me. But a lot of people that weren't Indians attended. You were invited to attend if you wanted
so
to.
So the community, the whole community was invited?
Yes, But, I can remember when Ottawa County was taboo to the colored man too. They didn't dare spend the night in Ottawa County.
Wow.
When I was little, you didn't see any Negroes because they wouldn't allowed to stay in the county overnight. Now, that's shameful.
It is.
They bleed just as red as we do. All looking to go to the same place. And I just think it's terrible that our forefathers did them. And slaves, made slaves out of them. Bought and sold.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it?
No, you can't imagine. I liked history in school. History. But I like mathematics better than anything. And that is one of my biggest, the biggest thing I regret was that I was qualified to take a CPA examination and had the training, because I worked for a CPA extra. All that was extra to my other work that I worked for him during the summer when they made up the budgets and when people made their income tax. You just have to type everything. So I typed all the time for him, and I sometimes sorted out from somebody's account and put the things in the right places and studied. I had bookkeeping and I had machine banking and all that in business college. And I went out to college and had some auditing and accounting and things. So I was qualified to do it. And this CPA I'm telling you about lived at Pitcher, and he had a stepson, and he wanted both of us to go and take the CPA exam. And I didn't think I'd have to work all my life. I thought I was just going to work a few years and help get started and then live a life of luxury. But there was no luxury on the farm. At that time we had moved, my husband and I had moved down south of Narcisse on a farm. We'd bought a farm down there and he thought that's what he wanted to do, so we moved on the farm. So I kept working.
And didn't do the CPA?
Huh?
And didn't do the CPA?
And I wish that I had have taken the examination. Not for the monetary gift particularly, but for myself.
Sure.
Of course, I'd have made a lot more money, probably. But I figured my Social Security out and worked the years that I figured would be to my advantage if I needed to go to a nursing home, so I called it just about right.
Good thinker and plan ahead.
Well, I'm a pretty good thinker. And I can add 2 and 2 together when I get people, some people that
Sure.
you can read them just like books.
Well, do you have anything on your bucket list? Something on your bucket list? Anything that you want to do that you've never done before?
No, I used to think I wanted to go to the Holy Land, but I just never did. I was going a month on the Australian trip, 3 weeks.
That's a long time.
What?
That's a long time.
Yes, it is.
Did you enjoy that trip?
Well, I enjoyed it, but there was 81 people in that tour. It was an amaranth tour, and there was 81 people. It took 5 buses to haul us. And when you got to an eating place, the first bus is already gone when the last one got there to eat. So you didn't get to be with the people that were in the tour really that much. But we went to that big opera house in Sydney, and we went to a little island out off of Australia and had dinner, and they have lots of food in their places like that. They have you can eat all time, all day. And they don't have many wooden roofs over there, or they didn't at that time because they don't have the trees and the wood like the other countries. They have tile that's shipped in that they put on there. But they have groves, they planted groves of cedar trees and evergreens, and they call that their Social Security because they have a big field of them, and when they get old enough, they think those trees will do for them what our Social Security does for us. Of course, they don't live, they live longer now, so wouldn't go very far. And the grove wouldn't go very far here either.
No, wouldn't.
In fact, they're trying to get rid of some of the red cedar in the...
Yes. They're a nuisance to the
That's
farmers.
one thing they're working on out of OSU.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it's right out of where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
I have a grandson that graduated from there and with a degree in marketing. And then he graduated from college in California. He went on to college after he went out to California. But they're working on something else, and he's working with them now. I don't know when it's supposed to materialize, but it's something to use the scraps from the trees, the leaves, and the brush, and all that, and from everything that grows that you'll use. And there will be that trash left. And I don't know, I don't understand all I know about it.
Well, let's talk about what you do today. What time did you get up this morning?
I got up a little before 6.
Alarm clock or just woke up?
Just this up here woke up, and this woke up.
And
Now,
what,
if I go to bed too early of evenings, I want to wake up about 2 or 3 o'clock. And the rest of the neighbors don't want to get up then. But I woke up around a little before 6 this morning, but I didn't get up till 6. But this is the first morning I haven't dressed myself, and I don't know when, but I usually can get all my clothes on, except maybe my underwear. And if I'm in a low enough chair, I can put my underwear on. But I put my dress on and put my house shoes on and comb my hair, brush my teeth, and wash my face. And I usually have a little spit bath in the lavatory. We don't get a bath every day. We have certain days in the week we get it because they have so many.
Right.
But I've got to have one every day. And we have a real, one of the ladies that works part-time and goes to NEO to be some kind of a technician, is a former beauty operator. She fixes my hair every Saturday.
Looks good.
And I like my hair done.
Well, what time do you go to bed normally?
Well, sometimes it's 9:30, and if the NBA's playing, it's a little later. And if I want to see something else, I don't understand football, but I watch it anyway. I like the action. And
Which team are you pulling for in the NBA?
well, I was pulling for Oklahoma's
Yeah.
Thunder, but I didn't pull hard enough. But now I missed part of the last night because I didn't stay up that late. But it's usually 9:30 or so before if I go to bed too early, I wake up about 2 o'clock, and then I'm through for the night.
Well, during the day, what do you do?
Well, I go down to breakfast about 7 o'clock, and usually it's after 9 before we get through, and then Allison usually has something in little lessons or exercise or bingo or something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've been doing good manners, and the last 2 days. And then I go to my room and it's about time to eat. And then I go back to eat. And then it's probably after 1 before I get through, and I come back and I watch TV. And I have a record. It's not a record. I have a tape player in my room. I don't play it too often but I've got a lot of records or a lot of tapes for it. And sometimes I play that. Sometimes I watch TV. Sometimes I sleep. Mostly asleep. I don't know, for some reason, when you get older, you require more sleep. And I sleep more than I did before.
Do you do much reading?
My eyes I have that muscular degeneration that lots of older people have. Both eyes are stable. But I went to this specialist in Tulsa every 6 months for a long, long time. I haven't been this 6 months, but one eye is stronger than the other, and I don't tax them. I used to work lots of word puzzles. Mm-hmm. I got a word puzzle book that thick, 2 of them in my room, and I love to work them, but I do not tax my eyes because I want to keep them as long as I can. And of course I wear hearing aids, and I've worn those for quite a while, but that doesn't bother me like my eyes. I don't have to tax, I don't have to be careful with them like I do my eyes.
Sure.
But they don't focus so good in the morning, and sometimes I have to ask what time it is if it's time to get up. But now I can see all right around in this room, and you all, but I just don't see as well.
What do you think your secret So, what do you think? What do you think your secret is to living a long life?
Well, I don't know what it is, but now I have 3 children and I'm in better shape than either one of the 3. Now, my son has to have oxygen 24 hours a day, and he's 77 or will be this month. My oldest girl, she's 79, and she has a bad back and hip and goes to the doctor for everything. And my twin girl, to the boy, she's got a bad back and she's had her knees operated on, and she lost the upper part of one of her lungs when she's real young. And the only surgery that I've had that you call major was a hysterectomy when I was 31 years old. And I've had my hands operated on for cysts, but that's not a major thing, so I've only had the major one thing. I had the measles and I had chicken pox when I was a kid, and I have the doctor, and my vitals are very, very good for someone 100 years old. Every one of them is.
Blood pressure's good?
And my blood pressure is in line with what it should be, and they're just amazed at it. But no, I worked hard.
Well, that may be your secret.
Well, it may be. Of course, I didn't party all my life either. I did my share of doing, the dances and things like that. Never did learn a dance worth a ding, but anyway, I went. And in our neighborhood, when I was a kid, there was 5 or 6 kids all about the same age and families in there. We always got together and when we all went. Of course, you walked where you went. And we'd go to the other's house and have card games or dances or something. But we walked, but all those kids just met and walked together. So we didn't get out and party. You didn't party that way when I was a kid, drink and things like that. Now, I think during the war that more people drank than any other age or event, because it seemed like everybody had to have a bottle.
And smoked more than a cigarette.
I never did smoke. I never could remember to smoke. My 2 girls tried it, and so I'd buy a package of cigarettes, thinking I would smoke them, and they'd come along and say, "Mother, do you have anything to smoke around here?" I said, "Well, it's on the table in there." Well, it had been on the table for 2 weeks, and I never could remember to smoke. I never learned to inhale, I guess, is what my problem was. So I know, when you're kids, you try grapevines and all that kind of stuff, Didn't you ever hear that?
No. Did you try to smoke a grapevine?
Well, kids did, and all that kind of stuff when they're kids. They all went through a different phase than the kids just do now. They weren't near serious about it. It was just kind of sneaking around then. But it's serious with kids now. It's, they're... But I never learned. My brother never smoked. But my younger sister, she might have tried it, but I don't think my older one did. But anyway.
Well, if history were written today, what would you want it to say about you?
About the same thing.
How would you want to be remembered?
Huh?
How do you want to be remembered? If history were written today, how would you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered for my devotion in my family. Because, as I say, I never had a child get in trouble. with a law or anything, or get arrested or spend the night in jail. But they're never accused of stealing anything or anything like that. And I think when you raise them with those thoughts in mind, you've accomplished something.
And if they're the three hens and you're the chicken?
They're the three old hens with one little chicken, and I'm that chicken.
So you raised them
They are
right.
devoted to me.
You did a good job then.
Yeah, well, I feel like I did.
Yeah, I think you did. Anything else?
Well, that's the reason that I'm here in Quapaw. I'm near to Miami, and this is a nice, they looked and thought this was the nicest place. Well, this place lacks some things that you might want in another, and some things you might not want in another. So you can't be 100% on any of them at any time. On anything, actually.
Well, we've given you a few minutes. Have you thought of your cat's name yet?
I hadn't even thought of it soon.
Okay.
I'll tell you.
I was just checking back.
I'll tell you now. Isn't that funny? You forget the name of something that was so close to you.
Well, and we usually like to ask, do you have a favorite recipe that you like to cook?
I had not particularly my favorite dish, but I had a recipe for chocolate cake that used cinnamon in it. And in Eastern Star and these other things, I always had to do that, make one of those, because everybody liked it so well and it was so moist. And particularly the men liked the cake. But it had some cinnamon in it. And another thing I'd like to make was dressing, because I made dressing from the bottom up, scratch. And I was the dressing lady. I had to make the dressing. And
What would you put in it?
I put the customary stuff in it, but it was in the way I mixed it. I put a lot of eggs in it and all, but I never allowed anybody to stir it after it went into the oven, because your bread and everything's already been baked once and you don't need to make mush out of it. And I always had sage in it, but it was just regular old-fashioned toast and bread, heels and whatever you had.
Onion and celery? Onion.
And I was so old-fashioned that for so long I cooked my celery in one pan and my onions in another and then mixed them together. But I used to get the job of being the organizer. If Martha will organize it, we'll do the work. So they called me organizer if Martha will organize the dinner, we'll do the work. And they did. So I was really chairman of the dinners and see that who did what and which and why. So many of them.
And then brought the cake. What made the cake moist?
Well, I don't remember. I remember you used Crisco in it. I haven't made it for several years, and I hope they saved my recipe box, and I'm sure they did. But it was just moist.
Okay.
It had eggs in it, the regular thing, but I can't remember. But in the icing you made for it, you put Crisco in a pan and melted it, and chocolate in the other, which you used quite a bit of Crisco in the icing, so that made it moist
And good.
But I had a pan about that big, I made a cake and a half. So I always made a cake and a half in that. And they fussed over who got to take home any if it was left. And it was something you enjoy doing.
Sure.
And I used to do I did lots of work on all those orders because I worked at them. I was past officer, and I did a lot of installing of new officer because I knew how. And I didn't forget the names like I have my cat.
It'll come to you.
Well, sure it will. It's just as well as I know my own name. I brushed and combed her every morning for years.
So it wasn't just Kitty then, it was something
Well,
else.
I had a name Kitty, too. I had a cat named Kitty once. But,
All right, we won't ask you much more. Thank you very much for talking with me
Well,
today. It's been
hope I
fun.
haven't bored you.
Oh no, you were great. You were great.